All right, I'm going to start up, and you may or may not have ever heard the saying about imitation is the most sincerest form of flattery. Well, you can look at that in a lot of ways, and one way to look at it is that if you're going to make something, you should go out there and see if somebody else has already made it, and then sort of steal it from them, for lack of better words. And that's not really well put, but I think you get what I'm saying. So I went out to YouTube and I put in Bootstrap portfolio website, and I started to look through some of the ones that were in there. Some of them were pretty good. Some of them I had a hard time understanding because the video quality wasn't great, or the person presenting it was just hard to understand. And I do a lot of this stuff when I watch this at night when I get home. And when I do that, if I have a hard time understanding anything, I'm kind of like somebody who goes to a website to buy something and they're having a problem and they know they can go to another website. And I'm kind of the same way. So long story short, I went out and found this about an hour and a half long video by this guy named Drew Ryan. It's a couple years old. And in there he gave some starter files and he built a single page website, single page application. I've called it a spa before. And it's very well done. It looks really nice. And I decided, you know what? Well, I can kind of take his as a starting point, but I'm not going to take anything as far as his, he gave starter files and stuff. I'm not going to take any of them. I'm just going to take my own. All right? So I did this yesterday on a 1 to 10. Maybe I'm hard on myself. I don't know. But I gave myself a 5. This is what he had. It's called Responsive Bootstrap Website, start to finish with Bootstrap 4, HTML5, and CSS3. Like I said, it's an hour, 27 minutes, and 47 seconds. He's got a pleasant enough voice. He goes through it in a very nice, deliberate manner, and I thought it was pretty good. All right, I paused it here and there, took a screenshot to try to make sure I could figure out what he was doing, etc. So I went out to mine. So I've sent you the link to this, and this is mine. No, it's not. This is mine. Now, is it great? It is. Not great. It just is. I'm not going to say it's great or it's not great. All right. But this is what I created. So it's got, as you can see near the top, it's got a simple slideshow that comes up, and I put the same thing here. Don't look at it for the content. Okay, because I just threw a bunch of stuff in there. So I went out to unsplash.com, got 3 related pictures. I don't know if they're exactly portfolio related, but 3 pictures I thought weren't too bad to be using in here. All right, so there they are. And then I put some text in here, and in here is the footer, which you can tell there's basically no styling on it. All right, I also put in here, and I wanted to show you this because, for lack of better words, it's going to start to bridge the gap between what we're doing now and what we're going to do with programming. All right? And if you click right here, it's where it says show size. It's a button. And it shows you the current width and the current height of your screen. I don't know how I lost the word height, but I did, and that's okay. But you'll notice that if I go and I change this, and I make it a lot narrower, and I go down and I click that button again, now it says it's 500. And the reason I did that is so that you can see the natural points in here where Bootstrap breaks. You've already seen those, and if you haven't, if for some reason either I didn't do a good enough job of explaining it or you didn't look yourselves, but if we go out to get Bootstrap.com right here, so if we go out there and we go to documentation, there should be a thing that says layout. And in the layout, it talks about what a container is, the difference between using a fluid container and not a fluid container. In Mr. Ryan's video, he uses a container fluid, so it stretches 100% of the way. Then he goes and modifies it using a lot of padding to kind of push things over. And that's a totally fine way of doing it. But in here, again, this is what I want you to understand. when I crushed that down, the size of the web page down as much as I could on my screen, it was 500 pixels. So 500 pixels is basically the equivalent of an XS. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. And typically when you get down that small, you want stuff to stack. Some of it will stack naturally when you do that. It's just going to wrap and it's going to do the best it can. Some of the rest of it you have to tell. All right. And you'll see that in just a minute. So again, 0 to 575, okay, is going to handle this. 576 to 767 is most phones today. Not maybe every phone, but most phones today. And again, you have seen this before as far as hitting the F12 key. So again, if you look here, and I haven't even looked at this site, I probably should have yesterday, but if I hit F12 right here, so this is how it's going to look on an iPad Pro, etc. Of course, I've got to bop this size up, etc. This stuff, it doesn't work well with the overhead projector, just so you know, you'll have a better time with it with yours. But if I come in here and, for example, if I choose an iPhone X, you'll notice it says 375 pixels, so that'd be extra small. If I come through here and I choose an iPhone 6, looks like it's the same thing. If I choose a Galaxy, all right? But the point is, what I want to get across to you is, this is what you have to start thinking about as a web designer. All right, is how it's going to look. And what Bootstrap does, unlike you creating your own website from scratch with using nothing but maybe HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, Bootstrap does have the mobile first philosophy. It thinks small and expands. That's a much better way of doing it, and I think I've mentioned this before, because when you think big and then you go down, it's harder to do. Because usually it's much easier to render something on a big screen than it is on a phone. All right. And then you've got the medium. Medium, basically, for lack of better words, it's more or less a smaller type of laptop. You've all seen laptops that are about, what, 13 inches, 15 inches, etc. All right? I believe the one that I've got here is a 17-inch one. All right? A lot of people, what they do, and a lot of instructors here, and I guess I could do it, but I wish I was better hardware than I am. But what a lot of instructors at this institution do is they'll have two monitors. They'll have another monitor over here, which is bigger, and they'll either show from that monitor or they'll use that one, and one they won't show to people. Sometimes I wish I had one, because sometimes when I go and switch to another screen, it's like that wasn't where I meant to go, etc. It'd be much easier to do it that way, but it's fine. Large, okay, that basically is pretty much the standard size of a regular laptop, all right? And extra large basically is more a desktop. Now, that's not exact. You know that. And what I mean is, if I come over here to the portfolio, and I'm going to hit F12 again, now I'm full size, all right? So if I go down to here, it says 1280. All right, and if I go back to here, well, that's in the extra large category. All right, so the bottom line is, when you are sitting there and you're creating a website, this is all the stuff you have to take into account, amongst other things. Now, one thing that I wanted to do on this site, I took it out this morning. I won't lie to you. I made tons of changes to this because I've only been working on it for about a day or so. But originally in here, right there, I had a YouTube video of one of my videos, and it looked okay. You know, I had the size okay, but when I shrunk it down and it got below like 768, no matter what I tried to do to it, it was like way over here. Instead of, if this is my screen, it was just way over here. Part of it was off the screen. I couldn't get it to move. I tried margin. I tried padding. I tried negative margin and padding. I did everything I could to try to move it over, and it wouldn't move the way that I wanted to. One thing I could do is, it literally on the screen was like 560 by 315 or something like that. If I shrunk it down to about 150 by 100, I could get it to fit. The problem was, on the screen then, it was about this big, and you wouldn't be able to see it. It was just kind of silly the way that it looked. So I just removed it. All right. One thing I wanted to do, and I guess I thought I did it, but I guess I didn't, was to take this heading and center it. It's not centered, and I wanted it to be centered. But when you look at the content here, and again, don't worry about it. It's not really content that matters. I went to lipsum.com and literally took some of their stuff that was on the sides before you even generate the lipsum, so it was at least English. All right. And then if you look at it then, if I start to shrink this down, so if I really, okay, I guess that's as much as it's going to let me shrink it. It doesn't look terrible. All right, does it look fantastic? No, and I don't claim that it looks fantastic. But what you can see is one thing you may or may not notice when you look right here, and this is what Ryan does in his video, is when he gets down to a small size, he removes the little dashes that are there that allow you to go from slide to slide. Now, one thing, and I looked at it this morning because I should have done a better job of this, is when it gets bigger, either I should have moved those buttons up or I should have moved the dashes down. You see where they're kind of hanging right on the button. So that's not good. So that'd be something that you'd have to change. All right. And again, you'll notice as we keep doing this and as we keep getting bigger, notice there's a little shadow there right now. And when it goes down, the shadow is still there, but the font size has changed. These are all things that you have to keep in mind as a developer. All right. Now, I think I've told you this already, that I had been contacted, actually Mr. Growherring put me in touch with a woman who runs a dog rescue thing. And on Monday, I'm going to show you the video that I made. It's just a Zoom video of she and I talking. All right, well, since then, and I don't know if Mr. Growherring is out trying to get me business or what, or get us business, but he came up to me 2 days ago and said, hey, I got another person. It's a one-person, one-woman shop, and she'd like a web page. So I'm going to show them both to you, and I'm going to ask that half of you try to work on one and half of you try to work on the other. Now, I broke you up, whether it's fair or not. I broke you up, and I decided who's going to work on what page. You're not working together. I have no problem. Let's just say that the two of you here, Gabriel and Angie, were working on the same site. If you say, hey, I'm having problems with this, could you look at it or what? That's fine. But this is not right now, at least, meant to be a team effort. All right. Over time, you may decide that you want to do that. All right. But the point is, right now, where you are in your careers, I want you to get practice doing things yourselves. If you go to work for a small company, you might wear every hat there is in the organization. If you go to work for a bigger company, you might have a very defined job. I've said this before, probably not to you, and maybe Angie's heard it, I don't know, that I worked for 3.5 years as a C programmer for AT&T Bell Laboratories. I helped program telephony systems. Now, that was back in the day when you picked up a rotary phone, you got a dial tone, etc. All right? I know, that was a while ago. I get all that stuff. The point is, I was responsible for about, I would guess, 10,000 lines in a program that was 5 million lines long. Now, the thing that made it important was the stuff I was in charge of had to do with making sure that if someone dropped their phone or whatever, or if somebody got mad and hung it up real hard, etc., they still got dial tone the next time they picked it up. It may not sound like a lot, but it was a lot of work to do that and get it to work. And it was funny because sometimes I'd be sitting there in the lab doing this on the phone, trying to break my own code. The point I'm trying to get across to you is I had a very defined scope. You may or may not have that, depending on, if you go to work for a company. It depends on how many other people they have working there. All right. After I did that, I went into education for 3.5 years, and then I went and worked at an aerospace company for a year. And they told me, they said, one of the reasons I took the job was they said I was going to run a department. Good, chance to make a lot of money, etc. And I'm going to tell you this, you might laugh, it wasn't funny. It ended up that it was a department of one, and it was me. All right, so they said I was a department head. I wasn't. But the point is, everything that we had to do in there, I did. I did have somebody I reported to, so when I had questions, he would try to help, but I was the only person doing that. All right, so when you look at this, like I said, you've got this. It's not great. It's not terrible. And the only page I put this on was this. We're going to look at this show size button in just a moment. All right, you get to the second page then. And there's an about page. You'll notice I put a logo up here. Boy, that's really original, isn't it? What I did was I literally went out to Google Images and I typed in logo. That was one of the ones that was there. I took it, I cut it way down and made it about 100 by 100, doing all the stuff that I'd mentioned to you in class. In other words, it was big, and I cut it down because there was a lot of white area around it. You can still see some of it, all right? And I cut it down, and eventually, like I said, I made it 100 by 100. Then I went in here and created this. Now, is this fantastic? No, it's fine. It's kind of hard to tell, and I wish I probably would have used bolding in here. But if you're at home, that's a little bit darker. If you're on the About page, that's a little bit darker. The resume, etc. You kind of get the idea, or at least hopefully you do. All right. So here was the About page. Again, I'm not going to lie to you. This was based off of what Ryan did in that video. He didn't use these, all right, but he did use some of it. And I went in, guess what? Those are fun, awesome icons. All right, I went in and found the actual colors. When you use font awesome icons, you may or may not know this, but at the end, when you've got your class equal FA and all that other stuff, at the end, you can put in FA dash, for example, 3X. And that's going to give one that's 3 times its regular size. These are 7X. Or else 9. I think they're 7, though. I think that was as big as they went. All right. And again, does this look fantastic when you shrink it down? It's okay. You'll notice how it does eventually go down. So here we're 3 wide. Here we got a break. Come on. And we're 2 wide. And I can always, if I want to, jump back to the other page, click that button to show the screen size, or I could add the button to each page. Normally, I add that button to every page. All right? But we hadn't talked about any programming yet, so I didn't want to overwhelm you with a lot of stuff. So I only put it on one page. But again, even when I shrink this down, it doesn't look terrible. It stacks. This I should have done some more work on. I left these too big. These don't go anywhere either, just so you know. It'd be, oh, wow, I can go to your Facebook page. No, you can't. All right? And I have a Twitter account that I very rarely use. I have a LinkedIn. I don't have an Instagram. My kids always say that. Dad, I posted all this stuff on Instagram. You want to see it? Not really. All right. It's not my YouTube, and there was a Google+. All right. But you'll notice that when we get to a certain width, you see how they change. This, you can see how the size changes. There. And eventually, when it gets big enough, come on, it'll all, doesn't look like it, but it was meant to at least all fit on one line. Okay? Then we've got the next one. And the funny thing about this one, this is my resume. I took my address, etc. off of here, and I left my other stuff in here. But this is my real resume. Years ago, I worked for a gentleman when I was at the school I used to be at, and he saw my resume. And he said, I know you're not looking for a job, but, and he was and is a very good friend of mine, still is. He said, your resume really sucks. He said it nicely, but that's basically what he said. He said, can I have it? And I'd like to work on it and fix it a little bit. And he did. And it looks much better than it did before. So that's in there. All right, so that's all the stuff. And when you'll notice, this is, like I said, I couldn't believe how hard it was for me to go and shrink that down so it still looked presentable. All right? I think I've told you this before, but in case I have not, if you go out to StackOverflow.com, StackOverflow.com is a site for developers. And I looked in there and I put in like scaling PDFs on a Bootstrap 4 web page, etc., and a bunch of other stuff. And I ended up using a hybrid of 2 different things that people had put in there. Finally got part of it to work, and then the other part broke, so I had to go back and use part of what I had originally and part of what's in here now. All right? And in just a minute, I'm going to just look at the code that's in each page here and the CSS, just so you can see it. Now, the work, this is cheesy, but what I did was I went to the WeSom thing, and I grabbed the first one and I grabbed the second one. Literally, I went out to the website, took a screenshot. All right. After I took the screenshot, brought the screenshot up in Paint, then went in Paint and changed the dimensions so I thought it would look decent on here. This is the one that we built the other day, that simple form example, and those are the two WSOMs. And all I did was I repeated it here. All right. And you'll notice these are outline buttons with a BTN secondary. So when you put your mouse over them, they turn gray. And again, it doesn't look terrible. I'm not going to lie and say, oh, this is so fantastic, but it looks okay. All right, so here it is, and you'll see what it looks like when you knock it down to just a single column. All right, and when I keep knocking it down, I guess that's as small as it gets. It gets to a certain point, and it just jumps. It's either one column or it's three columns. All right, and then finally, the easiest page, because I didn't put any more on there, was this contact page. All right, there's not much on here. You'll notice that when I shrink that way down, it looks pretty nice. All right. And we get the hamburger menu on here too, if you didn't notice that. And they all work. All right. So I wanted to take just a couple minutes and look at a little bit of the code. Also, I wanted to mention to you, just so you know this, one thing when you work on client-side programming like this, there's a lot of duplication of code. In other words, I have 5 pages on here, and every one of the 5 pages, every page, has the same beginning, the same navigation, and the same footer. Now, you may not always have that on every site that you create, but a lot of times you do. All right? What Keegan is learning in the advanced class right now, okay, because he's actually, believe it or not, the next assignment that he's doing is his portfolio, but it's to put it in there and set it up as more, basically where it's hosted on a server, etc. He is using special types of files, and I don't want to bore you with it or confuse you with it, where he is able to put in all of the information for his Navbar, etc. once and use it 5 times. That's a much better way of coding. When you do stuff on the client side like this, it's darn near impossible to do. I'm not saying it's impossible to do, but you've got to do includes and a bunch of other stuff that most of the time, most front-end web developers don't do. All right? So let's take a look at the code that's actually in here. Again, you were sent all of this. You don't have to use it, but I figured if nothing else, at least I would give you a jumping off or starting point. Because remember, your chapters, I think it's 13 and 14 assignment, is to do a first pass or a first blush of your portfolio site. What I hope to have us do during the last week of class is I'm going to take this one and try to make it look much more professional than it does right now. All right? So I'm just going to, like I said, I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but I'm going to open up each one of the pages here. Let me knock this site down, the size down rather. Now, what I did in here was I used that Bootstrap starter file, just so you know that. The only thing that I added in here, and some of it will certainly make sense, I went out to that cdnjs.com site, and I grabbed Font Awesome right there. Okay? And I think I just grabbed the first one, because they've got 3 or 4, all.min.css. All right? Here's my local CSS file, which I just called styles, and we're going to look at that too. And there's my title. So I don't think we have to say any more about that. Hopefully by now, all of that stuff that's in there makes sense. But the next thing to show you is starting on line 17 with a comment that says navigation and going down to about line 51, so approximately 35 or so lines. They're the same on every page. The only thing that's different in here on every page, the only thing that's different is that on each page, it's got that thing that says active. Other than that, they're the exact same each time. All right? So, like I said, this is what I want you to start taking a look at yourselves. What do I mean? Well, play with this. In other words, when you build this, the best way to learn is to sit there and just put in part of that, run it, and see what that gives you. put in a little more, run it, and see what that gives you. Because the only way that you're going to understand this stuff, I mean, let's face it, I can go out to the documentation and read the documentation to you. I don't want to do that any more than you probably want to hear it. All right? So here was that logo, that image logo, that was for the brand. You'll notice that one thing about Bootstrap is they don't really allow you to nest containers. You can't have a div class equal container inside of a div class equal container. But you can have an unlimited number of div class equal containers on a page. And I have a few on most of these pages. All right. The stuff that's in here, this has changed over time. Back in the quote olden days, like up till about a year or two ago, all right, you had to build that hamburger menu yourself and literally put in the 3 lines. Now there's an icon for it. Okay? And I don't know about you, but if you say, well, I can give you 1 line of code, you can just plop it in, or you can type in 4 or 5 yourself, I'll tell you which one I'm going to pick. All right. Okay. And then this right here was actually setting up the Navbar. One thing I want you to realize is if you look right here, this ML Auto, what that does is it took all of the things that were in the Navbar and pushed them over to the right automatically. All right. And I don't know if we talked about that before or not. These, again, are my links in here. I'm going to talk about them now, but I'm not going to, of course, talk about them on the other pages. Because, again, they're the same other than that active class that's in there. So really what Bootstrap is it's not something to memorize, but it's something that if you've got a question, you need to be able to go to the documentation and say, okay, I'm looking for something on Navbar. So you start looking through the Navbar until you find one that's similar to what you want, and you look at the code. All right. Now I didn't finish watching it. It was a half an hour long, and I only watched the first 5 minutes or so. But I was watching a thing on the new Bootstrap 5. And they're trying to, I've always found some of the documentation for Bootstrap to be a little terse. In other words, it makes a lot of sense if you're already doing this. But if you don't have a lot of experience, it can be kind of hard to read through and figure out exactly what they mean. The person giving the presentation claims, at least, and again, I haven't looked through it, that in Bootstrap 5, there's the 2 big things are 3. Number 1, they've totally removed any support they have for Internet Explorer. It's like you use Edge, or or don't use a Microsoft browser, basically. That's first one. Second is the documentation, they claim at least, is better. All right, that it's much better written, etc. Now, a lot of times, all they have is they got code, which is nice, but there's not a great explanation of what the code's doing. So it's like, yeah, you're giving me the answer, but you're not explaining how you got the answer and what the answer means to me. All right, and the other thing is supposedly now in Bootstrap 5, well, down at the bottom where we're including jQuery, which we're going to start talking about in a few weeks, you don't need jQuery in here anymore. All right, so that's the other thing. All right, so then we get down to here. This was the slider. And again, I'm not expecting all of this to make sense in here. This stuff that's in here, that set up the dashes that you saw on the bottom there. So it says when you click the first dash, be at slide 0, second dash, be at slide 1, third dash, be at slide 2. All right? And I've said this before, most of the time what you find out is when you look in here is most computer things like this start at 0. All right? Now you say, well, you didn't start at 0 here. No, these are the ones I made. So these are the 3 pages, or the 3 images. So I just called them slider 1, slider 2, and slider 3. You could have called them anything you wanted to. You could put more slides in here. What I'm going to ask that you do is either on your own or using this as a start or some kind of a hybrid, again, for next Friday, your chapter 13 and 14 assignment is to do a first pass at this. If your first pass is you throw out all my information, all my pictures, and you put in your own stuff, that's a first pass. If you say, I don't like anything you did and I'm doing it myself, that's great. That's a first pass. I'm not expecting this to be fantastic where you're going to be putting it out there on the web and you're going to have 1 million hits. Now remember, one thing that you are able to do if you want to, So let's say Jameer creates his, and he's like, this is pretty dang good. Then what he may want to do is use GitHub Pages and actually post it and put it out there on the internet. All right. One thing, because I've had people do this before. I've got one of my students right now. I shouldn't say it's because he graduated in May. Let's see if it's still out there. I think I've got it. Probably going to give me an error on my luck. Nope, this is Luke. Luke graduated. He graduated last May. All right, and he used to actually tutor for the class here. All right, and this is his website. The point is he bought lukegosnell.com. So at any time during the program, he could take his portfolio and throw it out there if he wanted to do that. Now, it's not free. Typically, to buy a domain name, it's about $15 a year. All right. And then as far as being able to house it someplace, all right, that varies, with different plans, etc. Some are as cheap as $3 a month. You might say, well, that's still $36. Yes, it is. So if it's $36, if you have that and you were to buy your own domain name, which is about $15, that's about $50. All right. The woman that we're doing the dog rescue thing for, I asked her. I told her, I said, I went out and checked, and your domain name is available. I said, you might want to get it. In fact, I recommended to her. I don't know if she's going to do it or not because she's spending her own money to do this dog hospice thing. She is not being funded by anybody. She asks for donations and stuff, but it's all hers. And she spent thousands of dollars, the way it sounds, on different things. All right? So let's just get back to this. So again, that's his. All right? But let's go back and look at the code in here. So these are the 3 different images that are in here. And then here's the Jumbotron. Remember, you can put anything you want in a Jumbotron. All right? And the Jumbotron doesn't have to go at the top of the page. But one thing that you may or may not like about the site of mine that I showed you is my Jumbotron now is not above the fold. So you've got to arrow down to actually see the Jumbotron. All right? When you look in here, you'll notice it says, this welcome says display 4. Okay? You'll have to go back and look at the fonts in here yourselves, but there's a display 1 through display 6. I think they get bigger as they go. And it's a little bit more of a curved type of font. It's not like it's really a font type. It's meant to display. All right? Did I have to use that? Of course not. We could use anything we wanted to. And notice here it says Cal XS 12. What that means really is I want this to be 1 row across for any size, any size. How do I know that? Because I am not listing any other size. And since I'm not listing any other size, so let's say, for instance, I wanted this to be over 2 columns when it was extra small, but once you got up, let's say that I could do something like this. So if I did this, it would be 2 columns for extra small, 2 columns for small, and then maybe I put in col medium 1. That would say that after it got to medium size, be 1 column after that. Does that make sense to everyone? And again, if that confuses you at all, as I already mentioned to you, go back and take a look at where I just showed you on getbootstrap.com. Go into the layout section and take a look at what's in there. All right? And again, this could have been a lot of other stuff that we could have put in here. Okay? And missing that. You ever notice? Can you look at this? I don't know if you can see it. You see where it's got the line 102 where it says P class equal lead? Can you see how that's purple right now? There's a problem with my code, and the problem is, I didn't put an ending quote when I put that back. And you're going to get the same type of thing, whether you're using Notepad++, which is what I'm showing this to you on, or whether you're using Visual Studio Code. All right? All right, so nothing more to talk about in there, okay? And this is where I had the iframe in there, just to show that to you. And I wanted you to see, I did try to put it in, but again, I had problems with it. So I just replaced it with text. All right? And this is where I tried to, I did a whole bunch of stuff. I just ended up leaving a lot of junk in there. All right. This is that show size. So this is the button that's down at the bottom. All right. Should have moved over one, but no biggie. So what does this say? Okay, I've got a container div. Inside, I'm going to put in a button. Button type equal button. It's going to make a button. On click, it's going to call a routine. It's going to call some code called show size. And I also made the text on the button say show size. Does that make sense to people? All right. Then this is the kind of stuff that you're going to be writing. Now you might look at that and go, I don't get any of it. It's okay. All right. I pilfered 100% of this from the internet. I couldn't find the one that I had written, and I went out to Google and tried about 10 of them. But the way that most of them that are out there, what they do is they show you the width and they show you the height. But when you change the width or the height, they don't show you. They just still always show you the original width and height. That's not what I wanted. I wanted every time we moved and made the browser window smaller, I wanted that to be reflected, and I wanted that to be reflected so I could see the size at the current time. Okay, so this, and again right there, that's where it should say plus height. It's not a big thing, but now it'll just say that width times that height. That's all. All right. So we've got what it's saying in here is x equals either the inner width or the client width or the other client width. And I'm not going to talk about these right now. We are going to get into all this stuff. Okay. And then we've got the footer. All right. So one thing to tell you real quick is we haven't really talked much about these lines that are right here, these 3 lines that are on the bottom. Okay, these are the ones that you get when you use the example template, the one that I showed you. The first thing to realize is if you take a look at line 210, notice it says .slim.min.js. If you look at that, all right, well, someone in their infinite wisdom decided that even minifying the jQuery file, it was still too big. So they pulled out stuff they said most people aren't going to use. And then they minified it again, but they said this is a new slimmer version. So that's slim.min.js. If it ever turns out that there's something in jQuery you want to use and it doesn't work, you might have to change this. You might have to go out and grab the actual one that's out there. Again, hopefully everybody realizes that in lines 210, 211, and 212, all 3 of those lines, they're all going out to CDNs, to content delivery networks. So all of them are going out to the internet. So you would need an internet connection to be able to use any of this. This file that's right here, again, NPM is that node package manager that we looked at last week. This popper.js, everybody, my guess is you all know what like tooltips are. Well, you can also create what are called popovers. All right, and it's not a tooltip when you put your mouse on it, but you could take your mouse and right mouse click on an area and bring something up. So those popovers, that's what uses popper. So if you're never going to use popovers, you really wouldn't need that. All right, and then finally, it's the Bootstrap JavaScript file at the end, and they have to be, if you're going to use them, they have to be in that order. All right, now if you watch his tape, the one that I alluded to, that I took my ideas from, he puts all this stuff up at the top in the head section. You can do that. All right. There's all sorts of debate, and there's been debate for years in the JavaScript community. If you're going to add a bunch of JavaScript files, should they be at the beginning of the program or should they be at the end of the program? No one 100% agrees. All right. Now they've got a new way of doing it, and it's called using the defer command, which we'll talk about in a few weeks. All right. The other thing to notice is if you look in here, you can see these all say integrity, and then they've got cross origin in here. What that is used for is it's used to at least try to make sure that no one has done anything with those files. So in other words, those files should be pure. They haven't been tinkered with by anybody. All right. So that's the first one. And the rest of them will go faster because a lot of them, I just want to hit on the new code. So that's that one. Next we had the about. So again, all this stuff, that's all the same, that's all the same, that's all the same. So this is the new stuff. So when you look in here, you'll notice, again, here's where I had those icons, the HTML5 icon, all right, and that again is taken from Font Awesome, and it is 9x is the size I used. All right, one thing that we could do is what you can do in here, just so you know, all right, sometimes you see this because people put in stuff like this too. You can put in like class equals, all right, and sometimes you'll see something like this where it'll say, for example, style equals, and you might say 55 pixels, color equal red. And I wrote it in wrong. I realized I made a spelling error, but I want to fix all of it in just a second. Oops. All right, so style, font size equals 55 pixels, color, which is still not spelled right, equal red, and I probably surround all that in single quotes. So what I'm saying is you can actually go in there right there and monkey with the size as well. Would you want to do that? I don't know. All right, but there's different effects that you might want to look for. That's all I'm trying to get to. But all of these are set up the same. Oops. There. So we've got the one here for HTML with a little bit of talk, the one for CSS with a little bit of talk, JavaScript with a little bit of talk, Bootstrap with a little bit of talk, and Git. All right. There's an HR. Hopefully by now you all know HR stands for horizontal rule. It's a little thin line that it'll put at the bottom. You can also go in with CSS and you can format that if you want to. You don't want it to take up the whole length. It takes up almost 100% by default, but you can cut it down to 50, etc. All right. These were the other ones. So these were the social media icons right here. So notice each one of these goes nowhere, but we could have had them go someplace. So we could have had them go, I mean, let's assume here that Gabriel has a Facebook page, a Twitter page. You don't have to put them in there, but you might want to put them in there, all right? You're also getting to the point, and you're all old enough to understand this. I'm sure not trying to talk down to you, that if you're going to create this and you're going to put it out there for other people to see, by all means, clean up your Facebook page. All right. My niece, she's just a super kid. All right. I've gotten really, it's funny because I've really gotten close to my younger brother, over the last couple of years. And his daughter, both his daughters, they're great kids. All right. But his one daughter, she's a teacher. I think she teaches 8th grade in the Milwaukee public school system, and I think she teaches in the inner city, from what I understand. And she loves it, and they love her. But you go out to her Facebook account, and boy, I've never seen that many F-bombs in my life. I wouldn't do that. Because if I ever got in trouble here, that'd be something they could potentially use against me. All right? And I tried mentioning it to him once, to my brother once. I could tell as soon as I started, he didn't want to talk about it. Okay, that's totally fine. All right? Because I guess in the end, it's probably none of my business anyway. All right. So the easiest one is the resume page. Because the only thing for the resume, it's all right here. That's the only thing that's different in that page. All right. So we're telling it where this lives. I threw it in my images folder. I didn't know if that was a great place to do it or not. I had to add this. View equal fit H. If I didn't do that, it's telling it to fit the height based on the size of my viewport. If I didn't do that, the height was always this high, literally. So you could scroll through it and see it, but it was ridiculous. All right. And I came in here, I set the minimum height to 100% view height. Normally I wouldn't write it like this, but like I said, this is what I found online. Between this, all of this was online, and it worked after I put in this. All right, so that's that one. The work page, again, I'm not going through anything we've already gone through before. So this is what I did. As I mentioned, And you can see this. Let's see. Do I have it open still? No. So these are my images. There's the PDF file. There's the original logo. So the original logo was 1200 by 630. So I brought it up on screen. I cut it down, all right, as best I could and made it, I guess it's 50 by 45 now. All right. All right. And let's see. So these were those cards. And I wanted to show you cards. So these are the images that I used for the cards right here. And again, I just went out, took a picture, so I had the whole thing on the screen, hit my print screen button, all right, saved it, brought it into Paint, kept playing with the dimensions, tinkering with it until it was the size I thought looked pretty decent. All right. Now, just so you know, normally, if I was doing that, because I didn't do it here, but if I was doing that, one thing that I would do is the GitHub repo, they're not going anywhere. If you're going to put a GitHub repo in there, really should have it linked to that repo. All right. Plus, if I wanted to, I didn't do this, but if I wanted to, I could have taken these, each one of these, if I put them out on GitHub pages, I could have made those clickable images. So if you clicked on the image, I could have literally taken you out to the site. That's something you might want to think of doing. All right. I was reading this article the other day, you know, how hard it is to get hired during a pandemic. We don't know how long this is going to last. You know, I mean, if it's now May of 2021, are we still going to be sitting in this room with masks on? Type of an idea, and no one knows right now. Okay. But what you want to make, you want to be able to make what what's in your portfolio stand out. That's what I'm saying. All right. And then finally, the last one that's in there, which was the simplest one, was the contact form. And again, nothing new here, nothing new here. I literally went out, and I don't remember where I got it from, the contact form. I think I took it from that one. I sent you that site that had the 4 Bootstrap examples, and one of them was a portfolio. I think I took it from there, but they had a bunch of stuff on the side, and I didn't like that, so I removed that. But I used that as you know, just a starter for nothing, if nothing else. You'll notice that when you start doing this, there'll be a lot of different classes that are going to be in common. For example, every single form element that you put in has a class of form control. All right? That's the documentation. All right? You have to really dig through the Bootstrap documentation to find that stuff out. And for years, I've looked for a good book on Bootstrap. I've yet to find it. I've bought a few of them that are, I'd say, that are okay. But you don't want something that just lists. You don't want something that basically just copies the documentation. All right? And it's funny because every time I approach a publishing rep and I say, you have a book that does, no, you want to write it? All right? And if I had the time, maybe I would, okay? All right. And then finally, if we take a look here at the CSS, because I'm just about finished. All right, so you'll notice I only have the one file, styles.css. And it is, I put my media queries in here as well, 255 lines long. Probably should have had a separate file for the media queries, because that at least would have cut it down, what? To 170 lines. That would have probably been a little bit better. But as we quickly look through there, some of this stuff, again, I'm not lying, I stole it. This is the color that Drew Ryan used in his. It's not exactly black. It's more or less a darker gray. These are all things that you should be thinking about as you go in and start on your, because your web portfolio is an extension of you. All right. And I don't mean to say, hey, my favorite color is purple, and my next favorite one is red. So I made my background this really dark purple, and I made my text a really dark red. You can't read it really well, but I like it. Well, that probably isn't going to get you a lot of jobs. All right. All right, so we just set up a class called padding to add some bottom padding. This is all stuff for the Navbar. You'll notice in here, that's that exclamation point important that says overwrite anything else that might be set for that. All right. This is the stuff for the carousel. This is one way of taking that carousel caption and centering it. Not the only way. It's the way Ryan used in his. And I went through it and looked at it. I thought, well, it sort of makes some sense. So I used that one. There's some work in here with text transform, with text shadows. Again, you want to learn how this stuff is used? This is just black right here. Change it to purple or to gray, or change one or more of these numbers. All right. This was for the Jumbotron. I tried to at least somewhat put some stuff in here. Some of the stuff I put in as I was trying to move stuff around, and I just left it in there. I left this in there. This is when I was trying to get the that iframe to center. I just left that in there. Probably should have removed it. I mean, when you've got a lot of code in there, if you're not going to use it, all right, and you know you're not, you really should remove it, because comments become code bloat. You know, if you're turning a 100 line file into 1,000 lines because you've got 900 lines of code you used to have but aren't using anymore, that's kind of silly. But you should put some comments in here and there as well. My names weren't probably great: about header, about paragraph. These are all this was the coloring for the HTML5 for these. So this is all the coloring for the different icons. And those were the ones that were on the page, those 5 that were together: HTML5, CSS3, JavaScript, Bootstrap, and GitHub. Underneath that were the 6 social networking icons. So we did a little bit of work we want to make sure that each one of them had this font size that probably was a little bit too big. All right. And put some padding in there, but this was the Facebook color, the Twitter color, the LinkedIn color, the Instagram color, the YouTube color, and the Google Plus color. All right, how did I know those? I literally Googled, for example, Google Plus square or Google Plus code or color code, and it showed it to me. All right, and I just plopped it in there. This was the hover. Just put a little bit, when you put your mouse over it, a little bit of a gray, color to it. Again, you could use that, not use it. Did very little work with the footer. Just worked with the colors. All right. And here were the media queries. So again, this was when I was having problems with the Jumbotron moving stuff over. I left it in there, but not real much. Changed the font size, which was 4.5 down to 4. All right. On a screen size that goes up to 992, and cut down the padding a little bit. Then down to 768, did some work with the carousel. So it's starting to get smaller now. It's starting to get more the size of a tablet. All right. So again, worked with a caption. And if you notice in here, can somebody tell me in English that line that's in gray on line 201, what does that mean? Yes, but what it's saying is I want whatever the default size is for my H1, I want it to be 3.5 times that size. All right. So you can use percentages in here. It's totally fine to do that. All right. Captions, etc. This was that display 4 that we talked about, and I made it double its regular size. These were the social media icons again, and much of the same stuff then for when we got down to larger cell phone sizes. Okay, really cell phone sizes. Same kind of stuff. So take a look at it. You want to use it? Fine. If you don't, if you think I can do much better myself, that's real good. It really is. But at least I wanted to give you a jumping off or a starting point. The rest of the period today will be lab. Tomorrow will be a lab. On Monday, as soon as you come in, I'm going to show you that I'm going to show you that the tape that I made. And either today or tomorrow, I'm going to try to get a hold of the other person, see what they want. All right, and we'll work from there on Monday. But the plan is to give you quite a bit of time next week for lab. Now it might seem like you're getting a lot of lab, but after next week, we're done with HTML, CSS, Bootstrap, etc. When I say we're done with it, you're still going to be writing websites that are going to include this stuff, but we're going to bring the programmatic aspect into it. Add some interactivity to our sites, all right, and learn how to actually start to do some basic programming, all right. Questions on anything that we went over? So you've got that stuff if you want to use it. If you don't, start on your own. All right, the last thing I'll mention real quick is, because I know that Gabriel B. over there had asked me about this the other day. When you're looking at the homework, sometimes for the homeworks, all it has is a URL, which means that you should really watch this. But with a lot of those, there's no way that I can ever tell whether you watch it or not. You know, there's no thing that says completed, etc. It's not like with that Froggy, where when you finished all 20-some levels, it gave you that thing. No, it's not that. You know, that's designed for you to go in there and be able to get a more in-depth presentation. I have mentioned this to you. I'm going to say it again. You were already sent the links. But Evan, I don't know if he's done a third one. But this is one, we actually taught Bootstrap in a week to middle school kids. Not this past summer, but the summer before that, Evan and I did this. He basically wrote most of the code in here. I did a few modifications, but if you want to see that, you can. In fact, if you're interested in that, I can get you the code for that probably. All right. But here was his Bootstrap Lecture 1, Bootstrap Lecture 2, and I don't know if he's done a third one yet or not. Or you can always tell because how many days ago it was. So that was 2 days ago. All right. If you learn better from hearing it multiple times or in multiple ways, cool. Not a problem. I'm not offended. All right. That's all I've got then. Thanks.